I drive my car up to the lake as if there's someone to awake. I haven't been to bed for days, I live in a twilight haze. And I set my heart to the setting sun, and I hope that no one else has done it. And the drinks are never far, open up the bar.
So we're recording now. We'll just get straight into it, Bianca, I think. Now, I mentioned before when you came in that we had last year, Jasmine came in, who has Flowers by Jasmine, and she came on the podcast, and afterwards, this happens after every podcast. We always sit down, we record, and then we switch it all off, I pack it all away, we open up the cafe, the person stays behind, they have breakfast, and then we have an intense conversation, which we're like, oh man, I wish we could have recorded that. But it's not always the way. So, and your name came up, and I kind of, I mean, I don't mean to say that I forgot about you, but I was just like, oh yeah, cool, that sounds interesting. And then my wife started reading some books, neuroplasticity ones by Norman Doy. He's got a couple, and she's pretty much finished one. And when my wife reads a book, it's kind of like I read it, because she tells me just every detail, blow by blow, what's happening on each page. So I kind of got back into that, and then I did a search, and then you came back up again. So here you are.
Awesome, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Bianca, tell us a little bit about your background. You've got two businesses, Neurospark and Mindflex.
Yeah, absolutely. Hence we could go in many directions today. But my main business, what I'm mostly focusing on at the moment, is Neurospark. So Neurospark is my company. I'm a mind-body practitioner. And I know sometimes people are like, what does that even mean? But essentially a lot of my work is around helping people understand the brain and what's going on in the mind, and specifically in my case, how it really impacts our physical health and our body. So I run a 3-day workshop on that called the Lightning Process, which is based on neuroscience and something called NLP and psychology. So it's all about the mind-body connection. And in that, I'm working a lot with people that are really stuck with chronic symptoms. So that could be chronic physical symptoms like pain and fatigue, long COVID and those sorts of ongoing things, but also things like anxiety, OCD, low self-esteem, like mental health symptoms as well. Anything where it's just really ongoing. So there's that, and then I also run like standalone workshops and do a bit of speaking here and there. I've got my own podcast, and then the Mindflex stuff is more workplace wellbeing. I'm creating some offerings, and I've got some workshops that I go in to talk to teams and workplaces about the nervous system and health and all of this stuff.
It's I've definitely checked out your podcast, and that's well worth for our viewers to all go look up and go through. You've broken it down into really kind of good chunks, and you've explained things extremely well. Like, thank you. Yeah, because I think. So you've had your own personal journey of illness, and I think some of the things that you've expressed is obviously it's a massive learning curve, and you're frightened, and you're going through all sorts of kind of life-changing. Just it's tumultuous, man. You're out at sea, and there's storms in every direction, and you're kind of like, well, where's some dry ground? Yeah. So you've gathered that up over time, and I can kind of tell, you really enjoy just nailing down those definitions.
I'm glad you said that, because to be honest, that's something that I personally find I almost struggle with the most, is getting across. And a few people have said that, so it's very reassuring for me, because, I have had probably 10 years of, like, I've moved through a chronic illness, chronic pain, and come out the other side, and I've had other things I've had to navigate. So it's only been now I've only been able to really sit down and try and chunk it down. And I think because I have a lot of wisdom to share, really trying to nail that, thinking about where I started, say 10 years ago when I was sort of in the depths of trying to figure out what next. I think it can be quite challenging sometimes to really give it in bite-sized pieces, but that's what I'm working on. So thank you for the feedback.
Oh no, I really enjoy it, and then it's also interspersed with interviews with different people, which is massively helpful as well. So tell us a little bit about the lightning process to begin with. Also the NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and how those two things, were they are they separate identities and you've kind of brought them together, or do they kind of coexist together all of the time?
Yeah, so NLP stands for neuro-linguistic programming. It's quite a mouthful. Essentially, an NLP practitioner, which I am, is someone who works a lot with the subconscious mind. And NLP, it's a form of therapy almost. It can actually be used in so many different contexts. Like they use it in business for sales. In my sense, it's like healthcare and understanding how our brain is sort of programmed and words impact our brain, and how to restore information in the subconscious mind. Even like high-performing athletes, often when they're doing mindset skills, there'll be some NLP involved. So it's really figuring out how we can best store information in the brain and change the meaning of different things that you've gone through. So there's quite a lot to it. In the context that I do it, it's sort of more around that hypnotherapy NLP. So when I studied, we learned a lot about the brain. We learned a lot of techniques. I sort of take someone into a visualization. We might go back to a memory from the past, and rather than going into it like you would in a counselling session, you're more getting into a nice state. You're working with something called submodalities, so you're changing like the colour and the image in your mind, and it's a lot around words and how linguistics, changing our words, can store different information in the brain. So NLP, I don't practice so much by itself anymore. I used to do sort of one-to-one sessions, but I find doing the lightning process, which is my main offering at the moment, which is a 3 half-day training that actually has NLP in it already. So it's sort of already interwoven, especially when it comes to looking at language and how when we change our language it can influence our health. So the lightning process is it's a 3-day training. I studied over in London, so I'm a practitioner. There's, I think, probably about 40 practitioners around the world, 30 or 40.
That doesn't seem like many.
No, it's not. It's not many, but it's quite rigorous training as well, and people may come in and out.
Is it longer than 3 days?
The training? Yeah. It's like a year and a half, so I did my psychology here. I didn't need to have done that, but I already had an interest in the area. And then I had my own sort of personal experience overcoming pain. I did the lightning process myself as a client in 2014.
So there was someone in Christchurch already practicing it, or just in New Zealand?
No, there was actually one lady up in Auckland at the time. So I flew up. I was completely, I know I've gone a bit off topic, but at the time I was completely skeptical and new to it, just because this was 10 years ago when there probably wasn't as much out there in itself.
And to be honest, that's a perfectly natural position to approach new
I think
phenomena.
Very healthy as well. I think
you should be skeptical.
Yes, you should be. But when my pelvic physiotherapist and a doctor talked about it, that's when I started to look into it, because naturally, as well as you start to try many things for different chronic conditions, you lose hope. So I sat on it, I went and did it. I read lots of books around neuroplasticity, did a lot of research, it all made sense to me. And yes, when I did it, it completely shifted the way I looked at what was going on in my nervous system with my health. And that's when, a few years later, I moved to London and did all this extra study. Became a practitioner in this field, and for me it wasn't specifically about teaching the lightning process, it was more just really immersing myself in this stuff. It kind of ended up leading in that direction. Who knows where I'll take it eventually, but So now I'm a practitioner in the same training. It's kind of evolved since then.
Yeah.
I run a workshop that we all run. We all run the same workshop, but we can kind of put our spin on it, bring in, we have a lot of research. We're always up to date with the latest in neuroscience. So we bring in our own kind of stuff when we need to.
Yeah.
But it is like a standardized thing that we run across the world. Yeah.
That's cool. So, and Mindflex focuses more on, I suppose, did that arise out of a need of, because Neurospark focuses more on people who are in pre-existing chronic illness and things like that.
Yeah.
Did Mindflex kind of come out of the... I should just ask you, where did Mindflex come from?
Yeah,
is it sort of... I'm imagining it's kind of more prevention.
I just noticed the same types of people that I would see with chronic illness. A lot of really high-achieving people that end up burnt out, or they'd come with these sort of... these issues, and I could see certain things in people's personality and the way they're responding to life and stress. So I really wanted to get my concepts across to like a wider audience. Plus, like, everyone just keeps saying, like, you should be sure everyone needs to know these tools. Like, these aren't just for chronic illness. This is generally for a positive mindset, understanding emotions, moving through emotions. I love speaking. I love communicating. And that was kind of just opening my business up a bit more to having different options.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I can definitely see how, I think the health system as it is, it cops a lot of criticism and stuff, and there's a lot of talk about falling through the cracks for people who have got those complex chronic illnesses. And sometimes I wonder if that's kind of the wrong kind of question we should be asking ourselves. But often, there can be a long journey of years before some of the people find, or pretty much all of the people get a diagnosis. And even then, when they get the diagnosis, it's no comfort. So moving some of that information forward through that could potentially help.
Yeah, I think
a lot of people.
Current health system, I think they do an amazing job. Well, everyone that works within the health system. Yeah. And I have major respect, having gone through some experiences in my life and been in it, but also witnessing other people in it. I think, though, I'll be honest, I think the way that we approach chronic conditions is not ideal. Acute illness, absolutely, the best care. Chronic is where it becomes a little bit more complex, just because these issues are so multifaceted that it can be a bit disjointed when you're in the system trying to navigate your way around. And you'd go to your doctor or a specialist if you're dealing with these physical symptoms, like a sore arm, broken arm, let's say sore arm. But it's a bit harder to really get the mental support to look at your stresses and your emotions. Yeah. And it's the same with if you're dealing with mental health, you're going to find a counsellor or a therapist, which is amazing, but perhaps they don't have the time or the complete understanding of knowing how that will impact your physical body or those funny sensations that are scary. So that's where my work kind of comes, and that's where I think we need to take a more holistic approach, really being able to understand the nervous system and know how the connection between the two, and how if we look at things holistically, I believe have a better chance at healing. Yeah.
Explain to me, because this is obviously one of the big misunderstandings that perhaps a lot of people will have, is that mind-body connection. And although it's becoming a phrase that is kind of used more in the holistic health and different things like this, can you kind of unravel a little bit of the mechanics behind why the mind affects the body, and how you can have very real physical symptoms and find sort of healing through... I think there was a term that you used in your podcast, here I'm going to have to look at it, head down and body up.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of reaching an illness through, like maybe an illness in your body,
How do you
through your head, or going the other way through a
physical? I understand what you're saying. Yes, so where to start? So the mind-body connection, I know, again, these terms, they get thrown out there and it's like, bring it down to earth. So the mind-body connection is simply when we have a certain thought, how it impacts our body and vice versa. So, for example, like I'm nervous about public speaking, I'm going to have those nervous thoughts, and then I'm going to have like sweaty palms or like heat rash. That's like the mind-body connection. So it's always working. It's just that we don't really give it much thought, because the way that we have approached health in the Western society, more so in the last 50 years, has been quite a disconnect of like, you've got mental health stuff, go to the counsellor, you've got physical health stuff, go to the doctor. It's just like separate it. So I guess I'll take my story for an example. I spent a lot of time I had 2 chronic pain conditions. I looked from the outside, just like nothing was wrong, but chronic pain, chronic fatigue, autoimmune issues, these are very, and mental health issues, very internal experiences. I mean, you can see some people are physically struggling, but I was dealing with a lot of pain. There was an original, perhaps, reason for the pain being there. Like most chronic pain, it could be an injury, an infection, a virus.
That's right.
But after a while, for people with these conditions, it kind of just lingers. It's like it just continues on. Then you're sort of stuck, like, what's going on? This shouldn't still be here. So I spent a lot of time looking at it from this physical, like, why am I experiencing pain in these areas? What's going on? And all the tests would come back relatively normal, And it wasn't until I really, because I was very sceptical of thinking it had anything to do with like the brain or the mind, because that felt very dismissive to me. Like this pain is real, these symptoms are real.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that people probably, it's not that they misunderstand it, but they find it offensive being told.
Absolutely.
The physical illness that you've got, which is just pulling you down, can be kind of
beyond just that physical body.
Yeah, and it's like, well, what are you going to do? And this is the indoctrination that we have experienced with the Western medicine type of thing. We're looking for a physical answer to a physical problem kind of thing.
So the first thing I would say is it is a physical issue, and there's no denying that. Like, you can have changes in inflammation markers, hormone levels, all of that. Like, you can still have physical changes, absolutely. And any physical condition, it is still a physical issue. And I get people to think bigger than that, because it's like our cells are constantly regenerating. We have like a whole new body every 7 years. So why are people stuck in these long-term chronic illnesses? And again, this is very specific to chronic illnesses where you just can't find a cause, and everything looks relatively okay, like you're sort of needle in a haystack. So at that point, how I like to describe it, what I understand now is, again, the nervous system, the sort of connection, the highway between the brain and the body. In my belief, it becomes almost like the alarm system's gone off, switched on, and it's stayed on. So the messages have sort of changed between the brain and the body. If you're dealing with chronic pain or chronic fatigue, that's a... Can I swear on here? That's a shitty experience. Totally. It's a scary experience. So naturally you start thinking about it more. You start becoming more anxious. You've got to deal with work, relationships, And what happens is it strengthens certain pathways in the brain.
Yeah. I'd sort of describe that as a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
The brain's trying to do its job to keep you safe, to make things easy.
There's like a feedback loop. And
it's a feedback loop.
And it kind of just gets...
It turns from like a road to like a highway.
That's right.
And it's not, it's no one's fault. It's actually doing a really good job. It's doing what it's meant to do. But what can happen in the body over time is that feedback loop, it's like conditioning. What do they call it? Pavlov's conditioning. Like, it's conditioning so much so that if you have a thought, it actually sparks a different a different body response. So your brain is essentially kind of going down that pathway. It changes. What happens is you get stuck in a bit of a stress response, and all of your stress hormones, these hormones that we don't really want to be in. It doesn't matter if we're in them from time to time throughout the day, But when we're staying in them like this, that's when our body starts to become affected. So if we're in these elevated stress response because our brain's like, this is going to be forever, there's a lot going on, what can happen is some of these systems in the body, like the digestion, like the thinking, like your immune system, they all get kind of put to the back. They're not prioritized.
No.
And that's when our body's not in a state to heal.
Yeah.
So the work I do is really there's so many ways we can do this, but it's how can we signal safety back into your brain that it's actually okay, back into your body, which is more the bottom-up stuff like breath work, slowing down, certain exercises that you can do. So I mainly work more with the brain, but I do know a lot about the body. Yeah. And when we do it both ways, your body comes back into what we call homeostasis, but it essentially just means balance.
Equilibrium.
Kind of thing. And then all the things switch on, and that's when we start to heal. So it's kind of working backwards. It's not like we're striving to get our health back, because that is self-stressful. It's like, how can we let stuff go so that we take the stress off the body and bring it back into balance?
I think people feel like, look, I can deal with those things later once I have my physical symptoms under control.
Yeah.
What do you say to that? Like, how can you kind of say, no, it's actually up the other way. We're going to deal with those things and then your physical symptoms might change.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously you've got to deal. Like, if someone has
I hear
an acute need physically, that needs to be addressed. I'm not suggesting that.
I think it's just more about how can you take a wider perspective and perhaps it's like, even when I say we're working with the brain, it's not about like all your deepest, darkest fears. It's not like a counselling session or anything like that. It's more about where have your thoughts been trained to go, and we can look at it from that real neurological perspective rather than you're going to have to open up a can of worms. Like, I will say though, for some people such as myself, if you've had like a trauma in your life, that it's not the trauma that actually causes any impact in your body, but it's more the response that your body goes into, because you think about stresses or traumas, we're constantly on edge after that, and our body goes into like, manage and keep us safe. So again, it's more thinking about it from that perspective rather than the mind and body. It's like, has my body learnt to just be on alert? Has my body learnt to try and keep me safe? And when we see it like that, I'd say it's more, to answer your question, it's more just thinking about, if I see things from a different perspective, and if I really believed that perhaps I could shift some of these symptoms, how would that person show up and what step would they take next? And it probably would be to prioritise health and see it that way.
Have you put much thought towards, just when you were talking about this, it occurred to me, have you put much thought towards why a chronic illness takes a long time, and sometimes when people do techniques like the lightning process and stuff, they get results real fast. Like, I think yours was kind of chronic pain of 2.5, 3 years, and then sort of no pain, 3 or 4 weeks. So, like, why doesn't it take that same duration of time to kind of build your way out of it?
Well, you have to have the tools, right? Like anything. Put it this way, for me, no one, and like I said, this was 10 years ago, but no one had ever asked me questions that would have made a lot more sense if they had asked me when I was looking for something that would work. So no one had ever said, like, have you, like, of course dealing with a chronic illness is stressful, but what was going on before that? Like, was there anything going on to kind of put you out of balance? Do you understand the nervous system? This is how things work. Like, it's not, pain doesn't have to be forever, but your body's got stuck in this loop. It was more like, we don't know what to do. This is a probably, I want to say, a lifelong condition. Here's some medication. And again, I get that, because that's just what people do. That's what they learn. But that's scary when you receive that information and then your beliefs start to form. So what can really be detrimental is, I believe, that when our beliefs become really embedded, like, I'm managing this lifelong condition, it's what I have been diagnosed with, therefore it will remain forever, that can really get in the way of us healing. So for me to get I'd say relatively short, fast change, which, to be fair, like with my clients, sometimes I see it quite fast, sometimes it takes 6 weeks, but it's still short given they have to go through a real internal shift, and that's the difference. They have to first get to the point where they're willing to see that perhaps their symptoms are symptoms of a condition, but perhaps there's room to shift that the condition might be lifelong. That's the first thing you have to do. So you have to actively seek out success stories. You have to actively seek out positive inspiration rather than be in that mindset of this will
illness.
Never change, because it's the subconscious starts to find more information to
look
support
I think it's you're condemned. You're sentenced to a period of time with an illness, and we go to Google and we see all of the scenarios, and
but I will say as well, like it takes work. It's not like like you're instantly cured. What I do, I'm not doing any of that. It's a training, so I'm giving people practical tools.
That's right.
Around self-coaching, visualization, changing the language, posture, breath. My clients do these throughout the day when they go into certain thoughts, when they feel certain symptoms, so they're retraining the brain and the body. They're kind of just getting on top of these automated responses to bring the body back down to baseline. So it does take work. It also, for some people, takes a bit of acknowledgement of certain things from the past, and like I said, not going into it, but really just acknowledging and seeing health in a different way that is more holistic, that you can see that maybe your mind and body have been responding in a certain way due to certain things.
Beliefs. And isn't it remarkable how much weight beliefs have? And we like to think, each of us like to think, well, I have my beliefs because they're true, and I wouldn't have them otherwise. So why should I change them?
Beliefs are, I think, out of anything I would say.
That's your belief. That's another one, mate. That's another one.
They are, I mean, naturally, I think our human brains like certainty, and we like that kind of predictability. So we're going to latch on to something that makes sense to us, that we know works, right?
It's kind of, it must be, because like we're predisposed to certain ways, and it must be to protect ourselves, right? Or something along those lines.
We're very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like prehistoric.
Well, we love comfort in our society. We've built up, and in the Western world especially, but we've become very soft.
But we've still got that prehistoric driver to survival carrying on during our day.
It's like
without a doubt,
the brain and nervous system, when I talk about them, kind of the same thing, like our mind and body. They're designed to keep us safe, essentially, like from back in the day with tigers. Like, we're going to do the same thing until we're forced not to do it, right? So to even think about shifting your belief, there can be quite a lot of resistance to that. So when I'm working with my clients and really getting them to shift beliefs, like I won't take anyone who's not ready to look at things differently, but that requires a lot of research often for people, like reading books, like really gaining some facts and some evidence, depending on how your brain works. For me, it was really finding inspiration in others' stories and being like, wow, I'm mind blown, because I've been in this realm of people telling me it's not possible, and there's actually quite a lot if you go searching. But for a lot of people, it's like more the scientific facts of just understanding the science, and that can really help us just more like, not like shift, but more open up to different avenues, I would say.
So you have to identify the idiosyncratic thought modalities.
Do you mean in the work I do?
With like how each person's mind operates, their thinking style.
Absolutely. And I think I see, I see certain, like I said before, I see certain patterns that come through that I think really keep us in general as humans. I keep us in a stress response that aren't the cause of illness, but they can keep the body in that heightened state, which really blocks our healing. And that is things like being really critical on ourselves and having that constant like critiquing of and then you push yourself harder and harder and harder to the point you miss your body's cues. People pleasing can be a big one because we're draining our energy constantly by just responding and not really listening to our intuition. And again, if we think about that on the body level, we're again missing our body's cues of just screaming out for like, no, you don't have the time and energy to do that, like look after yourself. So even if we think of it from that level, we can see how there are little things that we all do as humans
100%,
that can get in the way of us really prioritising our health.
Like my intuition definitely comes through my soma, through my body, without a doubt. And like if I'm trying to be the controller or whatever, I read through those egoic states of being the controller or perfectionist, which we all know all about, most of us. And that just blocks our body cues, without a doubt. So we're out of that balance.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I think perfectionism is a huge one, especially in today's day and age, given, I think, everything we're exposed to with social media and comparison mode and things. But also the body is fascinating because when we really start to tune in, we can notice where we hold. Like, for example, I tend to hold in my shoulders or my jaw, and it's even noticing those small cues can help us really gain awareness of what is my pattern? Where's my body showing me when I'm running around in fight or flight? Because it's this more that we don't want to be in that state all day. And if we at least notice, I'm holding my stomach or my shoulders, even being able to just do those minute things through the day is really beneficial for us, I think.
I noticed even just taking one breath, one single breath can move you out of stuff. Completely.
Our breath is very powerful.
I think you said that it's one of the most impactful kind of things, or one of the kind of it just has such an immediate effect kind of thing. It really goes straight to the heart of the issue. As far as all of the tools you give people, like posture and visualization and things, but breathing is breathing, I think it's because it's in if we say top down is in looking at the brain neurological stuff, and bottom up stuff is more like the body. Breath, I guess, connects both. So when we and I know I still have to learn a lot more because I purposely slow down my breath, and then I can go into old patterns when I'm excited or talking like this, where you speed up. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but living in that state again can cause the fight or flight. And when we practice slow breath, we're toning what's called our vagal nerve, which is the main nerve between the brain and the body, communicating that safety. And then you can use it in other ways. If you're really trying to get out of a shutdown state, you can breathe faster, and that gives you a bit more energy. I think it's just a fundamental. If anyone's listening and they're like, where can I start? The breath is just a nice thing to be able to practice every day. Hey, can you tell me, so when someone is on that kind of journey and they are looking to shift from operating in the sympathetic nervous system, switching over to the parasympathetic one. Do you remember, this seems like a strange question, do you remember the first time you experienced that, and was it kind of, did you almost have a transcendent moment? Were you okay, I've heard the theory, I've had the teaching, I've put it into practice, and it's oh my gosh, it worked?
I think it's a good question. Do you mean and feel it in my body or just my mind? Or
it is a weird question.
Well, I think you mean when you had a paradigm shift, a movement in state.
I had multiple consistent. I guess I don't know who's listening in your audience, but I guess I had a very fast shift in I guess it was about 10 years ago of understanding many concepts. I had bang, 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 wow, wow, wow. So the first, the first moment where I felt really my parasympathetic activated, which for anyone listening, it's that rest and digest state where we're really at ease, was before I'd done the lightning process, maybe a month before, I had some NLP sessions. I got some funding, actually earthquake trauma stuff.
Cool. That's pretty much. Is that available for everyone in Christchurch?
I think that unfortunately there was coming to the end of their sessions, and that was like 3 years down the track.
Okay.
But
cool.
you know, on that point, they should be still doing it.
You're right.
Bianca, you went to that reluctantly, right?
Oh, the earthquake?
No, the NLP.
Oh, yes, I did. For people listening, I mean, I'm assuming you've Christchurch listeners. I don't have to go into everything that happened, but I had a pretty traumatic experience during the earthquake. So I was probably very close to here, actually, in the city.
Yeah, sorry to bring you back.
No, I'm so fine with it now. But it did take me quite a few years, and I guess if I look at it around the chronic illness lens as well, that happened probably 8 months before I was diagnosed with chronic pain. And I always like to quickly say, that was not the cause of my chronic pain. However, what I really believe is that, like all of us at that time, we were living in like constant reaction and response.
Totally.
And a completely nervous system dysregulation.
Yeah.
That we had to. We didn't get a choice, right?
Yeah, and it served a purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, but...
And I think a lot of...
but man, it's not.
It's not...
I think everyone in Christchurch is able to say that's not a nice... thing to exist in for such a long period of time. The earthquakes went on. It wasn't just one earthquake.
No, it was consistent.
Months, if not years, of aftershocks and all the rest of it.
So when I talk about spiking your body into that fight or flight, that's what we were doing. So like I could see how there was a combination of things that perhaps my body was already at a high level of being on edge when I did end up having chronic pain. But back to the parasympathetic thing. So I actually realised, wow, I think this is 3 years down the track. Wow, I think the earthquakes affected me more than I gave it credit for. I'd seen some pretty gnarly things, and I think because it was such a terrible time for a lot of people, I just didn't think my experience was really impacting me, but I think I held a lot of that in my body. Yeah. So when I made that connection, I actually got some funding, and I went to a counsellor, and then reluctantly went to this NLP person because I was like, well, what is that? Like, this is weird, but whatever, it's free, I'm going to go. And she happened to have trained in hypnotherapy as well. So the first thing she did was actually get me onto just like lying on this bed and like did some breathing. That was it. A bit of, I guess, hypnotherapy in terms of her talking through me getting into a nice state. And in that moment, I remember being like, wow, I feel like I'm floating, as in I feel so calm. And that was deep parasympathetic. But I did realise, whoa, I haven't felt this in a long time. Or ever.
Yeah. Should I even be allowed to feel it?
Yeah.
I think that ties into the whole like human condition and pain and the reason why people take drugs and alcohol, right? I think those drugs are kind of putting them back into that, parasympathetic thing. Like there's this deep relaxation, and they're able, the weight of the world lifts off them. And
absolutely, it's you could see how it's an addictive feeling, but it's that feeling of like so tranquil, blissful when you're actually able to access that state when the noise shuts off. And that was my first experience. And then as I did the lightning process, I started really understanding that my thoughts had been very much in the future, worried about how bad the pain was going to be, and in the past, holding a lot of anger, certain people, or just about the situation, the pain, like just, life. And then I realised, wow, I hadn't had any tools to bring me to the present moment, and that was kind of that second piece of, wow, when I'm present, I've got a lot of brain space. I haven't been able to notice like things going for a walk. Like I was noticing the colour of the flowers. I was like, oh, this is new for me. Like I'm not usually here. I'm usually thinking like, oh, what's the pain going to be like later on, or like how am I feeling, or what. And being able to access the present moment, I think, can bring that same kind of feeling in the body.
Yeah, cool. The reason I asked that question is because I told Milton just yesterday, I've been listening to all your podcasts, reading so much and thinking about this a lot. And generally speaking, I live quite a stressful life, I think. And I kind of have, made my peace with it and sort of, which I don't know is a good thing. But anyway, you kind of turn it into a positive. Yeah. And I was real stressed out the other night, and I just couldn't relax. And I was thinking, and all of a sudden I thought, hey, this is it. This is the sympathetic nervous system. I'm stressed out. My breathing's gone all crazy, and I'm worried about all of these different things. And I kind of broke it down and thought about them. And my wife was just like, just forget about it and go to sleep. And
so easy.
yeah. So and that's kind of fair enough. But I was like, oh, this is an opportunity to practice some of these things maybe. And at that moment, I don't know, somewhere in that half an hour that I was lying in bed really restless, I mean, it was longer than that, but there was a period of time where, I felt myself change. And there was a sense of achievement and peace and kind of just general happiness. And I was like, wow, I can just go to sleep now. Like I can actually just forget about it and go to sleep.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of partially like tiredness.
Yeah.
Like that helped. That was kind of maybe a part of the drug of choice or whatever, the thing that helped me through. But it was also breath. And I don't know. And I was like, man, this is what it could be like for people with chronic illness who experience it the first time. They're like, crap, it worked. And then they wait for the pain the next time because they're told to see it as an opportunity to practice those things again and then resolve it and things like that.
Yeah.
So did you, because with me, stress doesn't occur in that state as often. So I'm going to have to wait a wee while. I'm going to have to stress myself out heaps until I get back into it I can practice it again. But with chronic pain, it must come back, in half an hour? Or is it an hour? Or is it...
I pause because it does feel like a long experience, but I'm actually working with a girl today, and she has the same condition. I had a pelvic pain condition. She's the same age, and I have been putting myself in her shoes a lot and thinking, yeah, God, it was so shit. Like, for me, it was like quite constant, and then it would get to the point where it would change around my body, which was even more sort of scary because it felt not contained. But people with chronic pain have different experiences, and fatigue. For some people, it's just waves. For some people, it's there constantly. It might be like an achy or a burny feeling. So you kind of just living with this background noise. And for others, it might be you do a certain activity and then you're like going into that stress, like, But the fear of it and fear of like what the day might look like, the week might look like, that drives that whole cycle of stress. So it's constant, but it's like anything we go through in life, if you're going through a stressful time or financial issues or relationship issues, it's that same kind of like, the thought will come and then you deal with it and then, oh God, what if it?
Yeah.
So it's I'd say it's just the more you're in chronic illness and symptoms, the more that your brain gets used to predicting. So it can feel like things spiral, but really it's just the brain doing its thing, strengthening those pathways. On that note, though, around like waiting for things to find a stressful moment before you practice, I think it can...
it's probably not.
No, I think that's most people's mentality, including myself sometimes, but...
Why fix it unless it's broke?
Exactly. But I think it's really healthy for us, even if you're not going to think like, I'm going to actively think about what I can do for my mind and body. It's like just doing things we enjoy, like giving ourselves permission to do those small things like that we enjoy, because that always puts ourselves into a nice state, a good regulated state. So rather than thinking of it like, how can I add that? It's like biohacking, like how can I add that next thing? And like it feels like it's like there's just so much to do. I just say like I get people to write a list of like what are those small things that actually bring you a lot of ease, and you can even feel it in your body, like your first coffee in the morning, or having a hot shower, taking a lunch break, playing some good music. All that stuff is very good for us just to incorporate in our day, and believe it or not, that actually brings us down to a level of baseline. Probably not to the same degree of like doing the breathing, but just by incorporating and prioritizing those small things can really just keep us, just kind of keep us more regulated without trying to implement constant things.
I think I've heard there can be a problem in the sense often we're unwilling to change or make changes in our life unless it's a serious problem, right? the example that I heard was if you live in a house and there's a little bit of mould, you might not do anything about it. But if there's a gaping hole in the ceiling and stuff, you're kind of motivated. And sometimes, that's a crazy thing to say, because on a physical level, it's kind of like, it's sort of saying, well, yeah, chronic, like a chronic issue, you're kind of pushed there. You can't not go there. Whereas, like, you have to address it. Whereas, I suppose your Mindflex business, dealing with in the corporate world and stuff like that, is more just the little problems.
Preventative, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, often because they're not big problems, we don't think. But the weight that they hold,
that's it.
Like, can be significant.
I think with chronic illness as well, or actually anything that I believe, my opinion, our body really speaks. And if we don't listen over time, then it's just going to speak in a different way.
Or potentially start to shout, maybe.
Yes, and shout over time. So, for example, like, you might find yourself just, you know, having a cold or flu. We all get cold and flus, but if it's consistent, right, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to push through. With time, it might find another way. And when I look back at my chronic illness, again, I was not to blame. However, I looked at where I could take influence. So for me, it was really, first of all, learning some tools to retrain the brain, learning how to regulate and get my body grounded. It was looking at the people-pleasing, the perfectionism, the way I spoke to myself. All of these things, did I really want to take all of that stuff through to the next version of me too? So sometimes it forces us to change. If we want to get well and come out the other side, it will force us to change our habits, which is how we kind of operate day to day.
That's right, yeah. And they're kind of, behaviours and things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I also love it how you see, like, you're beginning to see patterns and stuff. Because, you know, we all see patterns whether we like to admit it or not. And I find that interesting as well. Like, why do, say, for example, women often store the stress in the same place in their body? And, you know, I've often joked that you could just make a fortune going around giving women shoulder rubs.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking about that this morning.
It's just
I was like, oh, really? Yes,
but these patterns occur, and then you've got the physical, like, and that's kind of, I don't know, it's just weird. And then you've got, like, say, chronic fatigue stemming from glandular fever. Yeah. Like, that's a pattern that we see time and time again. Yeah. It's amazing.
And I think, you know, it's not like this approach is the only approach. I think we have to look at things that resonate, and I will say, like, although most of my chronic fatigue clients have really flourished in their back, but, you know, if you don't resonate with this approach, don't take it. Do something that feels good for you, and with any condition. It's just more like widening our scope. The patterns thing is fascinating. The thing on women is fascinating. I think when I look at myself and other, I say, female clients, autoimmune conditions are definitely higher in women, which is very interesting. And there's a guy called Gabor Mate. Have you heard of him?
For sure.
And he's actually said a lot of the stuff that I've always noticed, and I'm glad that it's finally out there in, like, a scientific way. But I think women specifically, I think there's socialization, like conditioning on both women and men in different ways.
Yep.
And I think when women are able to express their emotions, use their voice, get in touch with, like, not giving so much and being able to vocalize and allow themselves to feel angry or feel emotions that sometimes we're like, oh no, we have to be the good girl, we have to have it like this. And I think that can be really healthy for our body. And in the same way, if men have the safe space to open up and or, you know, I guess for men it could be in a slightly different way and be kinder to themselves and be appreciated. It's also very healthy. So I think sometimes these patterns just come out in the way that we think we're taught to behave, and then we kind of implement them as habits, and then I think there's a healthy balance between being able to express emotion and let yourself feel it, because we're human, and also, like in my work, really knowing what thoughts are good, what thoughts are useful at that point and what's not so useful, and being able to have tools to move out of the really stuck when emotion feels too stuck as well.
I particularly like the you mentioned the submodality. The submodalities.
Yeah.
Because often our will or whatever will get in the way. So is the submodality, is that a way of using your imagination to make change happen?
Submodalities is kind of like what image do we associate with certain words and certain things. So like if I'm quite a visual person, so even the word like overwhelmed, to me it feels like a cloud. Like I have this heavy cloud, and it's like very just here, right? And so when I'm working, I don't do it so much, but if I do teach people visualization, and I often say, like, where is that? Like, what is it? Is it heavy? Is it light? What color is it? And sometimes when we help the brain, even if you've got like an annoying person, if you like shrink them down in your mind, it can really help you shift your feeling towards that. It's quite fascinating. And people have different learning. I mean, like they process information differently. So submodalities might not work for someone who's completely like more logical and rational, but it definitely for some really resonates with being able to play around with colour, texture, and how we associate, subconsciously certain words and meanings attached. Yeah,
cool.
Oh, for sure. Overwhelm. I've heard that one, used quite a lot before, and to me, it's kind of there's definitely a feeling of helplessness associated with it, and that person is just saying, I'm being sort of thrown around in a wind, or I'm being thrown around in the ocean. Where's the life raft? I'm just being overwhelmed by water or something. To me, that's what it kind of visualizes. And I'm just like, well, that doesn't sound very good.
No, and I think...
I just laugh at them. No, I don't.
I mean, I definitely be there. I think I mean, I won't get into this conversation, but there's also differences in the way men and women's brains operate as well, and the emotional synapses and the connections. And I think for me, overwhelm feels like I visually see it as like computer tabs open. Like, oh my gosh, there's like so many tabs open.
Wow, cool.
I don't know, it's just another way. But you're right, it's not a nice experience. And I think overwhelm also ties into perfectionism. I believe, because if we're trying to do everything to a certain level and then we're spending all this time trying to get it perfect, which doesn't exist, then everything else piles up, and then we're like, oh shit, like now I've got all these things and I feel completely inundated with
I love it when you said perfectionism doesn't even exist. It's so cool. It's such a good thing to think about.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't. I agree. I agree.
It's so fascinating. Like, I mean, I personally feel like I've come so far with that I call it a pattern, right? Because we can all slip into it in different ways. And I used to have this assumption that it was around like just work or uni, and it's like you're trying to get the best grade, but really it shows up in sneaky ways. Like even podcasting, like, oh, I need to record, or like I haven't got the right gear and I'm not ready to start. Like all those things had helped me back for quite a while until I made that choice. Probably like you guys, maybe. Maybe not.
Oh, no, you're right. I mean, we constantly make mistakes. I'm freaking out. I mean, it's a big source of stress, actually. Maybe I haven't switched on record and stuff like that.
I've done that.
And then I will dream about it later. Like, I've always had very vivid dreams. I've worked in hospitality for ages. There was one time I was... speaking in my sleep, asking my wife whether she wanted a muffin with her coffee and getting really irate. If you, like, definitely our podcast, we are just winging it.
And I love that, though.
We just jumped into it and started doing it. So it's a good thing to try out.
That's good, and it's good that both of you guys are on board, because I feel like when you're doing it by yourself, you can always there's always other things you can do.
I suppose so. I mean, it's difficult getting sometimes guests to come in at 5:30 in the morning.
I'll get
so we appreciate.
I'll spread the word.
Yeah, we appreciate you making the effort. Hey, now, so the modality word, just bring me up to speed, because it can be used in lots of different ways. Because there's a lot of different, like neuroplasticity therapies
Different words.
Or modalities. So a modality is a way of achieving something, is it? Is it a vehicle for...
Yeah, so when we're talking about submodalities, that's just I personally don't like using big words because I feel like people are like, what? But submodalities is a word that is used in NLP. So it's kind of like, when we're talking about what is a submodality, it's the association we have, a visual.
Okay.
Or modality, the word just modality.
Oh.
Yeah, a modality is just... an approach, like what modality are you using?
Yeah, I see it as a mode of transport for some reason to get from A to B.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So what other one of the questions I have is what like certain techniques, methods, modalities, do they have a scope that they seem to work better on? Like, is there like a scope that the lightning process has where it works better on this area and it doesn't work very well here and it doesn't work at all here, Yeah,
so if we're talking just like, I'll just say lightning process and NLP. So NLP is great, I would say. If there's like, typically I'd use it after the lightning process for someone. Now, let's say someone's done really well with the lightning process, but they've got like maybe an event from the past that they want to go back to, because I don't typically do that in the lightning process. So we'd go back in a way that visualize, we'd see what was going on at that time. We would I'd do a few different submodality shifts, or I'd get them to tune in with the feelings. There'd be some different things that I would do without being able to explain it too much, because it would be a bit hard to explain. But that would be for any deeper, maybe unresolved emotions, perhaps like traumas and conflicts in families and that kind of thing. I can use a lot of NLP to really do a practical thing. And
in reality, the scope of that is pretty much everyone.
Everyone would have something. Or a fear.
That's right.
Yeah, a fear or something. The lightning process is more... I'd say a tool and a modality for really getting on these automated responses that your brain and body have learned. So the lightning process, I know this is a bit confusing, but the lightning process is a 3-day training. Within that, I teach a set of tools, and they take about anywhere between like 30 seconds and 2 minutes. It involves you doing a stop, a posture change, a breath. You're coaching yourself. You're asking yourself different questions, learning to change your words and activate, because our words activate different brain pathways. And then at the end there's a visualization, and you do like a colour, and then there's a few other elements that I do. So that's really good to use like frequently throughout the day, because you're just going back to your tools. You're going back to your practical tools, and rather than it being deep in like a one-off session, you're using these tools consistently. So, if you're thinking, if I had chronic pain and then I'm sitting here and I'm doing, maybe I've got a little bit of pain, but I'm really thinking like, what if this gets worse later on today? That would be the perfect time to do it, because that's not really useful in this moment. So what the lightning process, I really believe, does is brings us back to the present, and in that moment you're having those stress responses turned down, so your body can get into that nice state. Yeah. So that's the difference. I'd say the lightning process is more like habitual. You can use it frequently. NLP is more of a one-off kind of.
And then some of those other ones, like there's DNRS. We bought the book by Annie Hopper, and we were kind of looking into that. But some of the methods are like you go to a clinic and you they chuck things on your head like. Oh. And you're looking at a computer screen and you're changing it with your brain waves and stuff, that sort of neuroplasticity. Yeah.
DNRS is actually another brain retraining program, but there's like Gupta, DNRS, lightning process, like they're all similar kind of, I guess, trying to do the same thing, but I don't know too much. I've had clients that have done it. I think the way in which the tools are applied and like the length of the tools and how frequently is quite different. But yeah, that sort of stuff, I mean, I'm sure there's, like, I always say if you got a brain scan before you did the lightning process and a few months after, there'd be very big changes. So we're physically retraining the brain, but I don't do any of that kind of.
Oh, no, No, I'm curious about the whole spectrum of neuroplasticity, where it's going, And it's partially to do because my wife is reading these books, and she's been talking a lot about Moshe Feldenkrais, and now she's at this chapter. Sorry, I'm going to inflict it on you guys, where they have this electrical device that they put on people's tongues, and it helps people with Parkinson's, and it's incredible. Like there's this office where they have this machine and they do this treatment, and the people leave their walking sticks there because it takes so many weeks of just doing this crazy that would probably be a body up kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe. I think, I mean, I'm so in this realm that nothing surprises me because I see change all the time. So to me, it's not it's not shocking, but it is amazing. But I think neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, it's like a muscle. We're only really at the tip of the iceberg, even though it's been known for a while. I think we're only starting to shift into the possibilities. For example, like when I did my study in 2017, I was always a little bit like hesitant to tell people what I was doing, so I was like, this is kind of weird, I think it's woo-woo. Now I don't have that, probably because I'm just confident in what I do, but also I think since COVID there's been a massive shift in this whole like healing space, mind-body healing. People were, I guess, wanting to be a bit more aware of like their health, and I would personally say in 10 years I think this knowledge and these tools will be implemented into like the system, but I do think it's going to take time. But in saying that, there are many doctors open, many referrals from like a lot of people, so I think that's really positive that people are open to knowing that the brain can change, the body can shift. It's just getting some tools and understandings.
This has been seen as woo-woo for a long time, but I agree that what you just said. Like, there's no doubt that the mind-body connection is really powerful. There's no doubt our bodies have got its own wisdom, and
totally
that consciousness is just going to expand, and we're going to move into new patterns. And that sounds new agey weirdness, but it is actually true.
It's true. I mean, you just have to look at indigenous cultures and a lot of people that are probably generally more healthy. I mean, they're not. There's so many. Again, I could fully go off course here, but there's so many ways in which I believe we need to change as a society. Like, we operate very individualistic, which is fine, but we're not operating in community. We don't tend to see the mind and body connected. It's just
that comes out of the old sort of the atomistic scientific approach and all of that, and that was quite flawed in putting things into our logic bubbles
and a box.
All of that sort of stuff.
I mean, it has its merits, but I think when we're at this point where everyone's dealing with a lot of stuff, I think there'll be a bit of a reverse in priorities, and plus just opening up to concepts like this, like people just looking beyond what they've thought in the past is pretty natural progression, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon because, let's face it, we've all got loved ones who have got I was going to say issues.
Yeah. We've all got issues.
Not us in this room. Us three people are fine. So we've got loved ones possibly suffering from pain or illness in some shape or form, and that does help because, I mean, we're more drawn to these other ideas. But, the sort of pharmaceutical industrial complex or whatever it is, or some kind of medical thing, often, like we were reading, Milton's read a book by Aldous Huxley called The Art of Seeing, and he followed a guy called Bates method about eyesight, and doing some work around that, some brain plasticity, a long time ago.
Yeah, that was 1942 he wrote that.
Well, and Bates was before that. He was more at the turn of the century, and he got kind of, the optometrists at the time didn't like this guy.
They still don't.
No, he's healing people. He's doing these things. So they kind of shut him down, and they pushed him out onto the fringe, and they dismissed his ideas as, quackery or whatever.
Yeah.
But I trust Aldous Huxley. I don't think that guy's a liar, and he cured his eyesight.
Yeah.
not to like perfect 20/20, but his eyesight was appalling. He had to like hold paper right up to his eye when and he cured himself.
I often think about people that are ahead of their time. Like even my teacher, Dr. Phil Parker, the designer of the lightning process, he's an osteopath and is a psychologist, so he's got a very medical... and he's been doing this work probably 20 years, and started in a similar kind of experience of healing. But it's like only now are you probably getting these people getting slight recognition or understanding that there's something in it. But there's a lot of people that have known this or been working with the neuroplasticity for so many years that have probably just been dismissed or like kind of just not given the credit. I
think Huxley said we don't see with our eyes. It's just the physical organ of seeing. We see with our brain.
Yeah.
I've noticed that little meme starting to come up now in our culture.
Yeah, meme.
Yeah. Well, it's a language element.
Completely.
That creates our reality and changes our patterns.
Yeah. Our brains are, I think, we're very untapped on like where we could head, like in terms of our potential. But I think people are starting to understand that a bit more. Yeah.
Totally. What an awesome conversation. Thanks so much, Bianca. We're gonna have to wrap it up, unfortunately, because we open the cafe in 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you a menu because part of the deal is you get breakfast.
Oh, thank you. Amazing. This has been such a good conversation. Thank you guys for having me on. I feel like I've surprised myself being this awake and engaged at this time in the morning.
It was that short black.
It was a shot.
That sorted yourself out.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
That espresso, cool. Thanks. Like, we'd love to have you come on again and tell us more about your kind of adventures in this area.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
Cool. See ya.
Bye-bye.